Today we will be reviewing Ultimates 2, Volume 2, Grand Theft America, Marvel Comics trademark. The reason I don't go into Ultimates Volume 1, whatever the title is for that story, is because, in comparison, I kinda don't care. Grand Theft America is basically the only story in the Ultimates continuity that really grabbed me. Apart from the death of Spider-Man, but that was a whole ordeal, really. But that brings us to our next point. The Ultimates are not the typical Marvel continuity. Early 2000s, Marvel Comics thought it would be a good idea to essentially reboot everything for new readers, as opposed to the main continuity that could reference something in the 1940s and people would just be lost. It's a little bit intimidating, but with any reboot, there's always that little problem of modernization. And for some people, modernization kind of means make it edgy, over the top, and dark. I'm not entirely sure how this trend started, but it's definitely a part of the Ultimates formula. When something is needlessly violent or mean-spirited, I will be referring to it as the Ultimates edge. Get used to that term. And I know I just said I like this comic, I'm passionate about this comic, so why would I bring up some nasty business like the Ultimates edge? I am mentioning that because of the main selling point of the comic itself. Basically, the selling point is America wins. We're flawed, but we're still the best. The Ultimates are flawed, but this story is still the best pro-America story I've seen in comics to this day. Now, the Ultimates edge has its bad sides. Like, instead of making Captain America the paragon of virtue, the American values making somebody into the superior man, it makes him into a gritty, PTSD-having, borderline warmongering soldier. I'm not saying he looks for a fight. I'm just saying he enjoys being in a fight a lot more than he should. But on the other side, the bad guys are really bad. You want to see them get the tar kicked out of them. But more on that later. The story begins with this page of text. In this page of text is a lot of continuity things that you need to know if you want to follow along, except for the fact that the Hulk was killed by having a murderous rampage, and so they executed him. But he later shows up in the comic, and it's never addressed why. In later comics, you find out that people have been messing around with cloning, but it's a little bit jarring. It's not too jarring to distract you from the story. I just thought I'd mention it because it's just something I noticed, and I thought it was neat. The actual story begins in the Middle East, in a nuclear weapons facility. An actual nuclear weapons facility located in the Middle East. To summarize a few of these pages, there are SHIELD agents who have been modified with superpowers that go to town on this nuclear facility. There's also the Avengers, which include Captain America, Black Widow, Captain Britain, Quicksilver, and a number of others. I should also point out that in this continuity, Iron Man and Black Widow are dating, so she has her own Iron Man knockoff suit. And in addition to the superpower onslaught, there's the good old US of A bombing the tar out of everything. You might say this has something to do with the Ultimates edge I mentioned earlier, but you're wrong. This is to establish that the bad guys have a point. It's not the most sturdy of points, but it's there. The Americans do knock the tar out of this place, but they also help civilians escape. Basically, in a pro-America story, you have America looking like it's perfect, it's grand, it's great. This opening shows that America is not perfect. It goes overboard sometimes, but as displayed later on in the comic, it's not perfect, but it's the best we got. Anyway, Thor in this continuity is said to be not actually Thor, but some superpowered being with a mental illness. He is locked up. Iron Man has a talk with him. They talk about who's the bad guy and so forth. You can read it for yourself if you're interested in that, but I'm going to move on. Now, in your typical good guy versus bad guy kind of fight, it's usually like, we have a team, we're going to pick out who we're going to fight in that team, and that's just going to be it. But there's a little bit more thought put into this particular plan. For example, Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., also known as the world's most paranoid man, comes to suspect that Captain America is not in fact Captain America, but a spy who's been feeding him lies about surviving being in ice all this time. Kinda makes sense. Anyway, they take him down and lock him up. They also try to lock up Hawkeye. I say try because he puts up a lot more fight. Unfortunately, in exchange for him having much more of a fight, his family dies. Right in front of him. That is the Ultimate's Edge. Did that need to happen? No. But it's there, and I blocked it out from my memory for when I first read this. Moving on. Iron Man has a legion of robots, which are essentially knockoff Iron Mans, and which he calls Rocket Men. The bad guys hack these in order to add to their numbers. They also mirror the whole Middle East attack by having their own batch of superpowered flunkies. Just fodder, essentially, not the actual main bad guys, just random giant men, random flying men, etc. And while this is happening, the helicarriers, which are essentially giant flying battleships, are falling to the ground. So, a lot of bad things are happening. Black Widow reveals herself to be a spy for the other side by killing Jarvis. Again, Ultimate's Edge, didn't really need to do that. But moving on. And then the big boys show up. The main bad guys in this are called the Liberators. If you don't get the joke, I'll give you a minute. The Liberators consist of various superpowered beings from a number of enemies of America, including North Korea, China, Russia, the Middle East, and a few other places. It also has our local traitor, Ant-Man. Now, I kind of feel sorry for Ant-Man, because in whatever media I see him in, he is pretty much dragged through the mud, and here is no different. But if I continue to talk about him, I'm going to get sad and lose my momentum. Now, the Liberators have the upper hand, and while they do it, they make all kinds of jokes about the bad things that America does. And in typical superhero comic fashion, the tides will turn soon enough. Now, when Black Widow revealed herself to be a traitor, what did you think Iron Man would do? Just get shot by this totally cool spy? No. He drugged her with nanites, which essentially paralyzed her after she tried to point a gun at his head. And he gives a very inspiring line that basically says, billionaires don't get to be billionaires by being stupid. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Anyway, after Black Widow is dealt with, Iron Man goes into space, where he gets his satellite, space station-sized Iron Man suit to go and deal with the Liberators. Basically, Captain America escapes, Hawkeye escapes, and, in a panel that was truly inspiring, Captain Britain, a member of one of our national allies, does this whole revealing his secret identity thing. Well, not really revealing his secret identity, just changing in front of the bad guys. Like, I'm sure you haven't read a comic, so this is why we keep secret identities. It's a bit cheesy, but it's fun. And fun is very welcome in something this dark. And of course, there's the introduction of the Hulk. Back from the dead, apparently. Now, it takes a while for the good guys to find their counterparts, their bad guys that are supposed to be their reflections. But when they do, it's a one-sided slaughter. And when I say slaughter, I am referring to the Ultimate's Edge. The good guys actually do kill or seriously hurt, like cripple for life, that kind of thing, the bad guys. Did that need to happen? No. But with bad guys like this, you can kind of be forgiven for it. Now, I'm just going to take a minute to talk about the Colonel. The Colonel is supposed to be Captain America's opposite. He's a Middle Eastern man who has been modified by this shadow organization whose representative looks an awful lot like the tall man from the Phantasm films. I just thought I'd bring that up. The Colonel doesn't have a special code name. He's Colonel something his name. I would not even attempt to pronounce that. He thinks code names are juvenile and stupid, all while wearing a red knockoff of Captain America's outfit and wielding Darth Maul's lightsaber. They even mention this in the comic. There's more philosophical discussion between Captain America and the Colonel, which, like with Iron Man and Thor, pretty much doesn't lead anywhere. But if you're getting a little bit bored, here comes Loki, who essentially brings Middle-earth all the way to the White House to cause even more chaos. This is the bad guy's second wind, but this also triggers Thor to come out of captivity and join the party. Basically, somebody has stolen Thor's lightning up to this point, and when Thor gets it back, he basically takes his hammer and smashes Loki's face into the pavement. Then, to prove once and for all, yes, I really am Thor, he summons the Rainbow Bridge, which brings Asgard to deal with the Middle-earth thing. Now, why did I pick this comic to review? After spoiling so much, really what's the draw? The draw is America wins, and it's against actual enemies of America, which is not something that's allowed in modern comics. They are more than happy to throw some random space alien at you. They're more than happy to throw some nameless supervillain of the week at you, but they don't want to talk about the actual enemies of America. Just to let you know, I did not spoil everything. There is plenty for you to read in this comic. I personally could not recommend this comic enough. Thank you for your time, and have a nice day.